Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. It all started with a sleepover like any other. At the time, I was 13 years old. Not quite a child anymore, but not a fully free teenager either. I was in that confusing in-between stage where spending the night at a friend's house still felt like the ultimate expression of independence. It was late autumn, cool enough to need a blanket, but not so cold that we had to keep the windows completely shut. I lived in Riverview Heights, a small town nestled next to a vast pine forest. It wasn't exactly the kind of place where strange things happened, or at least that's what we believed. That Friday night, my friend Daniel invited us over for a sleepover. There were 3 of us, Eli, Sean, and me. His home was a 2-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac near the woods. It was the kind of neighborhood where porch lights clicked on at 7 p.m. like clockwork, and everyone waved even if they didn't know you. Daniel's mom worked the night shift at the hospital, and his older brother was away at college. In other words, we had the house to ourselves, which meant guaranteed chaos. We spent hours playing Xbox in his room, throwing chips at each other, downing Mountain Dew nonstop, and laughing like idiots at ridiculous YouTube videos. The room was small, barely enough space for his twin bed, a desk, and a messy pile of sleeping bags we spread across the carpet. We had just set up our beds and dimmed the lights when Eli, who was closest to the wall, asked, "Hey, where's my blanket?" Daniel chuckled. "Check under your bag. You probably kicked it off while moving around." Eli searched, checked, then sat up, frowning. "No, seriously, it was right here." We started looking around. No blanket. At first it was funny. Eli had always been the scatterbrained one in the group. One time he tried to charge his phone with a drinking straw, but we checked under the desk, behind the bed, even stepped into the hallway. Nothing. Daniel ended up giving him an extra blanket from the closet, and we moved on. We were halfway through a try not to laugh video when Sean suddenly sat up. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore. Where the hell is my blanket?" Now it wasn't fun, and his face wasn't joking. "Are you messing with us?" I asked. "No, man, I was just using it like a minute ago." Daniel turned on the ceiling light. It felt like someone dumped a bucket of ice over all of us. The mood shifted instantly. Complete silence. This time we searched more frantically. I even checked the laundry room and the guest bedroom downstairs. Nothing. 2 missing blankets. In a locked house. In a locked room. Even Sadie, Daniel's golden retriever, hadn't been in the room. We assumed she was, as usual, sleeping with her nose tucked under the living room couch. "Then who the hell took the blankets?" someone asked. "I don't like this," Eli murmured. "This feels like ghost stuff or something weird." Daniel tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, guys, maybe it's a prank. My brother doesn't live that far. He could have stopped by without telling me." He called him. It went straight to voicemail. We tried to relax again, but the vibe was gone. No one was laughing. Finally, we decided to head to the kitchen to heat up some snacks. We were out for maybe 20 minutes tops. When we came back, Sean froze in place. No, this can't be." His entire sleeping bag was gone, not just the blanket, the whole thing. Gone. We stood there staring at the empty space on the floor like it was a crime scene. It made no sense. We had all been upstairs. No one heard footsteps. No one saw a thing. Then I saw it. A scrap of fabric like gray flannel poking out from under Daniel's bed. "Hey," I said, "there's something down there." I bent down and reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the fabric, we heard a crunching sound, like someone shifting on plastic. My blood ran cold. I leaned in further, expecting to find a crumpled blanket. But what I saw were eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I screamed. So did the others. We bolted from the room, pushing each other in total panic. Daniel slammed the door shut and locked it. We stood in the hallway, gasping and shaking. "What the hell was that?" Sean shouted. "Who the hell was it?" Eli added. "I thought it was your dog," someone screamed. Daniel, pale as a sheet, shook his head. "Sadie's on the couch. She hasn't moved all night." "Those were eyes," I stammered. "Human eyes, not animal. Human. We didn't go back in that room. We dragged our sleeping bags into the living room and stayed there with the lights on. Sadie, for the first time all night, curled up next to us. But the way she kept staring down the hallway made everything worse. Sleep? Not even close. Around 3 a.m., Sadie stood up and began growling, a low, deep sound, her back arched. She stared straight at the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms. Then she barked, loud, sharp. We heard a creak. A floorboard? I remember Daniel whispering, "There's someone in the house." We grabbed the first things we could find, brooms, a fireplace poker, even a Nerf bat, and stood there, armed and shaking, waiting for sunrise. When Daniel's mom came home around 7 a.m., we told her everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't say we imagined it. She believed us right away. Then she saw the muddy footprints. They started at the hallway window, barely cracked open, and led straight to Daniel's room. She called the police. They searched the house from top to bottom. Found nothing. They said maybe it was an animal, or a prank. Maybe one of us sleepwalked and moved the blankets unknowingly. We knew that was a lie. A week later, Daniel called me. His voice sounded off. "They found someone," he said. My stomach dropped. Someone had been living in the attic. For months, maybe. They think he entered through the crawl space under the porch and just stayed. At night, he'd come down and take food, blankets, whatever he needed. The police found wrappers, empty bottles, some of our clothes, even stuff from our backpacks. I was speechless. "He had a knife," Daniel added. "A hunting one. They found it up there." Turns out he was a frogger. That's what they call people who secretly live in someone else's house. They hide in attics, basements, crawl spaces, and move around when you're asleep or away. They watch. They wait. And sometimes they do worse. The cop said we were lucky, that he didn't hear us. But we remember that night, that look, that moment under the bed. And the most disturbing part, he was probably already there while we were laughing, joking, and playing games. While we were barefoot, while we were sleeping on the floor. He was likely under the bed the whole time, watching. We never slept at Daniel's house again. They moved out that summer. His mom couldn't take it, not after what happened. The attic entrance was just a hatch in the hallway ceiling. It only took one hand to open it. And when I think about that night, I don't remember the jokes or the games or the pizza rolls. I remember the sound of breathing behind the wall and the eyes in the dark. Story 2. I was never the paranoid one in the group. That role always belonged to Trevor, or sometimes Brandon, when he'd spiral into endless YouTube tunnels late at night watching videos about cartel kidnappings or home invasions. I was the one who told them to calm down, the one who insisted the world wasn't that bad, that most people weren't evil, that those things just didn't happen. That was before last summer, before the night we all stopped being kids. It all started like any other sleepover we used to have. A tradition, really. Since middle school, every summer we'd take turns sleeping over at someone's house. We'd spend the night binging junk food, horror movies, and playing dumb games like Would You Rather? Or Would You Fight a Bear for $1 million? That time it was Caleb's turn. His house was a single-story spacious place on the outskirts of town, in a residential area called Brookside Pines. It sounded fancy, but it was more of a quiet suburb filled with regular families, a few retirees, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode their bikes at dusk and everyone waved even if they didn't know your name. Caleb's parents were the kind that bought snacks in bulk from Costco and let us do whatever we wanted as long as we didn't wreck the house. His dad was a pilot, almost always traveling, and his mom worked nights as a nurse. That Friday she left around 6:30 p.m., reminding us with a knowing smile not to stay up too late, fully aware we would anyway. There were 7 of us that night. Me, Isaac, Caleb of course, Trevor, Brandon, and Eric. We were all 17, seniors in high school, and there was this unspoken sense that it might be one of the last real sleepovers before college, jobs, or whatever adulthood had in store. Everything felt normal, comfortable, familiar, until it didn't. We started out easy. Pizza, Mountain Dew, a few rounds of Mortal Kombat, and then we watched The Conjuring on Caleb's giant TV. Around 10, someone suggested playing flashlight tag outside, but we passed. Too humid. Too many bugs. Plus, it was one of those nights where even the air felt heavy. No breeze, just heat pressing against the windows like it wanted in. Around 11:15, the doorbell rang. Caleb frowned. "You guys expecting someone?" No one said yes. He went to the peephole, then cracked the door open. "Oh, it's just Mason, my cousin." None of us really knew him. I'd seen him once or twice, maybe. He was a couple of years older, 20 at most. Always had that half-asleep, half-smug expression, like you couldn't tell if he was bored or judging you. "What's up?" Mason said, walking in like the house was his. "Heard there was pizza." Caleb gave an awkward laugh. "Yeah, there's some left." Mason didn't ask. He grabbed a paper plate and started stacking slices while the rest of us paused the movie in silence. He wasn't exactly rude, but it was obvious he didn't come to hang out with us. Brandon leaned over and whispered, "This guy gives me bad vibes." I shrugged. He's just older, or high. Who knows? Mason didn't stay long, maybe 40 minutes. Ate most of the leftovers, checked his phone nonstop, mumbled something about meeting up with friends, and left. Caleb didn't think much of it. He said Mason sometimes crashed there when things got rough at home, that his parents were out of town and he had a key. It was weird, yeah, but not alarm bells weird. We got settled around midnight. Caleb brought out sleeping bags, couch cushions, and we spread them out across the living room. We left the kitchen light on so we wouldn't be in total darkness. Everyone half asleep, tossing out dumb jokes until we passed out. Around 1:20 a.m. I woke up, not from a nightmare, from a sound, a soft click, then a dull thud, like someone sliding the glass kitchen door. I blinked into the dark, heart pounding. At first I thought it was Caleb looking for a snack, but when I turned I saw him wrapped in his sleeping bag, completely still, sound asleep. That's when I heard the voices, low, muffled, 2 of them. Then the lights came on all at once, and time froze. There were 2 men, both in black ski masks. One had a gun. Not a toy, not a fake prop. Real, cold, heavy. He pointed it at us and yelled, "Get up, don't move, hands where I can see them." I froze. My body reacted before my brain. I raised my arms, heart pounding like a war drum. I remember Caleb sitting up, dazed, Brandon letting out a whimper, Eric whispering, "Oh my God," over and over. The second guy had a duffel bag and started barking orders. Phones, wallets, watches, everything in the middle, now. We obeyed, not out of bravery. We did it because that man had a gun and the look of someone who'd used it before. Trevor dropped his phone too fast. It clattered to the floor. The guy with the gun lost it and aimed right at his head. "You think this is funny? Do that again and I swear." No, I'm sorry," Trevor stammered. We were all shaking. The second man rifled through Eric's backpack, dumped it out completely. Even took a used bottle of cologne. It was a robbery. Quick, quiet, methodical, like they'd done it before. Then something happened that chilled me to my core. The guy with the gun turned his head slightly. A brief glance, and Caleb looked back at him. Not with fear, not with panic, with calm. They made eye contact for half a second, but it was enough. I didn't say anything at the time, convinced myself I imagined it, until I noticed something else. They didn't touch any of Caleb's stuff. His phone was still on the arm of the couch, his wallet half sticking out of his backpack, his expensive Jordans by the door, untouched. I didn't know what to think, until the guy with the bag fired at the ceiling. The blast was deafening. Chunks of drywall rained from above. Trevor screamed. Brandon curled into a ball. Eric froze. And Caleb. Caleb flinched a second too late, like he knew the shot was coming. "Shut up," the ski mask yelled. "Next one won't miss." They finished grabbing everything. Phones, chargers, a Nintendo Switch, some Bluetooth speakers, and ran into the night. We sat there in silence, breathing, waiting for another shot, but it never came. We didn't call the cops, not right away. We called our parents. They showed up furious, scared, demanding answers. Caleb played dumb, said he had no idea who they were, that they must have forced their way in, that we were lucky to be alive. But we didn't believe him, not after what we saw, not after we started connecting the dots. "Your cousin came by earlier," Brandon said slowly. "And then these guys show up. Bit of a coincidence, huh?" Caleb denied everything. "You think I let them in? Screw you guys." But he was sweating. Not from fear, from guilt. Trevor pointed at the untouched Jordans. "Why didn't they take those? They're worth more than my whole backpack." Eric didn't say a word, just stared at him, like he was looking at a stranger. And me. I asked the question we were all thinking but too afraid to say. "Did you know them?" Caleb didn't answer. That silence screamed louder than any gunshot. Days later, we learned Mason had a record. Petty theft, breaking and entering. He'd been arrested more than once. The police never got involved with what happened to us. Our parents didn't want us tangled up in legal messes. They made excuses. Said maybe the guys just got lucky, that maybe Mason had nothing to do with it. But we knew the truth. We never heard from Caleb again. He switched schools 2 months later, moved in with some relatives out of state. Sometimes I still wake up at 1:20 a.m., still hear the sliding door, still feel the barrel of that gun on my chest. But what haunts me the most isn't the fear, it's the betrayal. It wasn't just a robbery. It was a choice made by someone we trusted, someone we laughed with, played games with, grew up with. The worst kind of monster isn't the one who breaks into your home. It's the one who lets them in and stands there watching while they tear you apart. Story 3. It all started with a sleepover. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just 4 girls, an old house, and a borrowed camera. But things like that rarely stay simple. Not when something is watching from the shadows. Not when it's already in the picture. Before anyone even opens the door. I was 13 when it happened. The kind of 13 where you still say mommy when you're scared, even though you're trying hard to stop. My best friend at the time, Callie Rhodes, had invited us to spend the night at her house on a Friday night. We were Harper, June, and me. She lived in one of those big old houses on the outskirts of a small town called Ashmill. One of those homes that seem to stretch like they're waking from a long sleep. Her family had moved there the year before from somewhere upstate, and we all thought it was amazing that Callie had the attic all to herself. No one else we knew had anything like that. The attic was weird, sure, but not in a bad way. It had slanted ceilings, old wooden floors that creaked with every step, and one of those round little windows at the end that looked like it came from a fairy tale. It was always kind of cold up there, no matter the season. But Callie had transformed it. She'd covered the floor with pillows and sleeping bags, strung up fairy lights, and dragged in an old TV with a DVD player to make it feel more like a teen hangout than a dusty storage space. We'd been there before. We'd played Truth or Dare, whispered about boys, prank called guys we didn't even like. But that night felt different. And I still don't know if it was because of what happened next, or if something deep down already knew the moment I stepped inside that something wasn't right. Callie's mom made us homemade pizza, and her dad was away for work, so we basically had the house to ourselves. She had an older brother, Ryan, but he was staying at a friend's house that night. Just us, the attic, and a few hours to kill. Callie always found weird things in that house. Weeks before, she said she'd found some old letters hidden behind a wall inside a music box with a spinning ballerina. Except the ballerina didn't have a head. That kind of house. But that night she showed us something else. She'd found her dad's old camera. A chunky silver Sony Cybershot from the early 2000s, with a tiny screen on the back and a flash so bright it made everything look washed out and pale. I found it in a box under the attic stairs, she said, tossing it onto the blankets. It still works. Want to play with it? Of course we did. We were 13, bored out of our minds and high on soda and candy. We took photos making silly faces, posing like models, like vampires, like witches, whatever popped into our heads. The flash was so strong it made everything look ghostly, which only made it more fun. Callie dared me to go down to the basement alone and take a photo with the lights off. I chickened out after just 3 steps. Harper and June came with me. We took a few blurry photos next to the old washing machine and then ran back up when we heard a loud thump from upstairs. We figured it was the pipes, or the cat. Callie's family had this old gray cat named Buttons who moved like smoke. We laughed, climbed back to the attic, and flopped onto the sleeping bags. Later, around midnight, we were curled up, half asleep, when Callie started scrolling through the photos on the camera. We huddled around her to laugh at our ridiculous poses, pointing and teasing like always, until Callie stopped. She didn't say anything at first, just frowned, went back 1 photo, then forward again. "Wait," she whispered. "Who's that?" "What?" said June, leaning over her shoulder. "That's us in the living room." "Yeah, but look." Callie turned the camera toward us. It was a photo of Harper, June, and me in the living room, pretending to levitate in front of the couch, arms up, mouths open like we were casting spells. But behind us, right at the edge of the hallway, there was a figure. Tall, male, pale skin, dark clothes. Just standing there, watching. "I don't remember anyone being behind us," Harper said tensely. "We were alone, right?" I felt my mouth go dry. "Maybe it's Ryan," I said. "Maybe he came back early." "No," Callie whispered. "He texted me an hour ago, said he was staying over." She hit the button again. In the next photo, the man was closer. Now he was standing in the kitchen doorway right behind Harper's shoulder. His face was still blank, expressionless. But his eyes were locked on the camera. June let out a muffled scream and pulled her sleeping bag up to her chin. "This is a joke, right? Like, you edited this or something?" "It's a digital camera," I said. "You can't edit photos on it." Callie's hand started to shake as she clicked to the next image. In this one, June and I were on the floor, fake wrestling. Harper was tossing a pillow at us. And him, he was right behind me, just a few steps away. His hand was reaching out toward my shoulder. His fingers were maybe an inch from touching me. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "He was so close," I whispered. "How didn't we see him?" "We would have heard him," Callie said, voice cracking. "He was right behind you." The fear didn't hit us all at once. It was more like the air in the room grew thicker, heavier, like our minds were struggling to convince themselves this wasn't real. But the photos were there, clear, sharp. He had been there, with us. "I'm getting your mom," June said, sitting up. "No," Callie stopped her, grabbing her arm. "They'll just say it's fake, or something stupid. Let's check the house first." That's when I knew Callie was truly scared. She never checked anything alone. She always made her brother go to the basement when we watched scary movies. But this time she grabbed a broom and led the way down the stairs. We turned on every lamp in the house, checked under beds, inside showers, in the garage. The back door was locked, all the windows too. "There's no way," Harper whispered. There's no way he came in and out without us noticing. We woke up Callie's mom. She panicked when she saw our faces, even more when she saw the photos. She didn't say much, just stared from one image to the next, her lips pressed into a tight line. Callie's dad came home early the next morning. He took the camera to check the settings, but we saw it in his face. He didn't believe it was just a reflection, or a lens flare either. Though the worst part happened later, when Callie tried to show her parents the pictures again. They were gone. Every photo from that night had vanished. The old ones were still on the memory card, but the ones from that night, the ones with the man, deleted. No one touched it, Callie swore. I didn't delete anything. Her mom tried to soothe us. Old memory cards go bad. Sometimes the photos just get lost. But it didn't feel like a technical glitch. It felt like something didn't want us to remember. We begged Callie's dad to take the camera to someone who could recover the files, but he said the card was too old, too corrupted. And that was that. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to end. None of us ever went back to that house. Callie started hanging out with other girls at school. Harper moved away the next summer. June stopped replying to messages months later, and we never spoke about it again. But even now, 30 years later, I still remember his face. He didn't look angry or sad. He just was. Like he belonged to that house more than we did. Like we were the ones intruding on his space, not the other way around. I've told this story maybe 3 times in my life. No one believes it. They say it was a dream, that we made up the photos, that it was just a dad in costume playing a prank. But I remember how I felt when I saw that last image, how close he was, how I could almost feel his breath on my neck, though I felt nothing at the time. Those kinds of things. You don't forget. You can't. Story 4. I didn't even want to go to that sleepover. It was one of those invites you say yes to only because everyone else already confirmed, and you don't want to be the only one left out. The group had been talking about it all week. Friday night at Miles's house. Movies and junk food. No parents. I didn't even know Miles that well. He went to the same school and shared a couple of classes with me. He was always quiet and kind of strange. Not in a threatening way, just different. The kind of guy who wears hoodies even in the middle of summer and writes in a black notebook while everyone else is trading chips and talking about football. But my friends were going, Jenna, Aiden, Rosie, Liam, and Chris. So I said yes. What I didn't know was that it would be Miles's first sleepover ever. He lived at the end of Larkspur Lane in one of those old 2-story houses with wooden steps and a wraparound porch. The kind that was once beautiful, but no longer cared for. The paint was peeling off the window frames, the yellow porch light flickered, and the front lawn was patchy and dry. His parents weren't going to be there. They had gone to Vermont for a weekend work retreat and left him alone with the money for pizza and a list of emergency contacts. Looking back, that was probably the first red flag. Who leaves a 15-year-old alone for an entire weekend with 6 other teenagers? But we all went anyway. Miles opened the door in his signature black hoodie, of course. He greeted us with a slight nod, barely saying a word, and let us in. The living room was dimly lit with a couple of table lamps. The curtains were closed. Next to the TV, an old dusty thing, was a stack of horror DVDs, a giant bowl of popcorn, and several off-brand sodas. Nice setup, Aiden said, dropping his backpack. Thanks, Ma, Miles murmured, standing still by the window like he didn't know what to do next. We got comfortable however we could. Jenna pulled a blanket over her legs. Rosie flopped onto the floor, and Chris kept cracking loud jokes to break the weird silence. I sat on one end of the couch and just watched for a while. Miles never seemed to relax. He kept glancing at the front door and the hallway behind him, like he was waiting for something. The first movie was one of those cheesy 80s classics. Dumb teens running through the woods, fake blood, over-the-top screams. It helped loosen the vibe a bit. We laughed at the bad acting, threw popcorn when someone got scared. For a little while, it felt like a normal sleepover. That changed with the second movie. It was slow, black and white, foreign, about a haunted house. Miles didn't sit with us. He stood behind the couch, not watching the movie, but watching us. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I saw Rosie shift uncomfortably and Chris turn his head to look. "You good, man?" Aiden asked. Miles blinked slowly. "This one's based on a true story," he said. Nobody answered, but he kept talking low and steady. "Most people think ghosts make noise, but they don't. They just watch. They stare until you stop noticing." "Cool, thanks for that," Jenna muttered. "Just saying," Miles shrugged. We tried to ignore him and finish the movie, but the atmosphere had changed. The room felt colder. Nobody was really talking. Rosie whispered something to Jenna, who just shook her head and glanced at the clock. It was only 10:45. After the movie, Miles offered to give us a tour of the house. No one was excited to see more, but Liam, being Liam, said, "Sure, why not?" And that got everyone up. We went upstairs. His bedroom had a faint smell of dust and something like cloves. It was strange. The walls were lined with shelves, books, candles, and little dolls made of fabric and string. They looked handmade. Some had buttons for eyes. Others had no eyes at all. A few were missing arms or legs. "Did you make these?" Jenna asked, forcing a laugh. Miles nodded. "Yeah, I used to make them when I couldn't sleep." "What are they supposed to be?" "People," he said. "Sort of." I avoided staring too long. One of them had red thread sewn across its mouth, and I swear when we walked in it was facing one way, but now it had shifted slightly toward the door. He opened his closet. Inside was a tall figure, almost life-sized, sitting on an old wooden chair. It wore a long black robe, and its face was covered with a burlap sack. There was a stitched patch where the mouth should have been. The hair wasn't yarn. It was real, brown, thin, and dirty. "This is the Watcher," Miles said, smiling for the first time all night. "He sees everything." "God," Rosie whispered. "Okay, I want to go back downstairs now." But Miles kept going. "You shouldn't look at his eyes too long. He doesn't like it." "He doesn't even have eyes," Liam muttered. "He does, under the sack." Back in the living room, no one really spoke. The third movie started, but nobody was watching. I kept staring toward the stairs, expecting to see that thing standing there. Little by little, everyone started dozing off. Aiden and Chris passed out in their sleeping bags. Jenna and Rosie whispered to each other until they too settled in. I tried to close my eyes, but I couldn't stop thinking about the Watcher. It felt like something was still awake. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The TV was showing a blue screen. Everything was silent. And something felt off. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. The living room was dark, but the hallway light was on. There was a silhouette at the edge of that light. At first I thought it was Miles, but no. It was taller, thinner, and wearing the same robe as the doll, the same burlap sack over the head. I froze. The figure didn't move, just stood there, head slightly tilted. I reached out slowly and nudged Aiden. He stirred but didn't wake up. When I looked back, the hallway was empty. I told myself I was dreaming. Had to be a dream. I lay back down, heart racing, pulling the blanket up to my chin. But then I heard it. The creak. Floorboards upstairs. Then another. And another. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I wasn't the only one who heard it. Rosie sat up, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Jenna was already awake, clutching her blanket. Miles never came back downstairs. The footsteps stopped. Then the sound of something dragging, like a chair. Jenna said she wanted to leave, whispered that she was going to grab her bag and call her dad. Chris told her she was overreacting. But then, The lights went out. All of them. The hallway, the lamps, even the blue glow of the TV. Gone. Total darkness. We screamed, fumbled for our phones. Mine. Dead. Rosie's too. Aiden's wouldn't turn on. Jenna's flickered and then went black. Then we heard movement on the stairs. Fast. Like something running. And then, it was in the room. I swear to God I felt it. A heavy presence, cold air, a slow, ragged breath. Someone screamed. Someone slammed into the wall. I dropped down, covering my head. And then, nothing. Silence. The lights flickered back on. Miles stood in the hallway wearing regular clothes, holding a box of cereal. "What happened?" he asked, blinking like he'd just woken up. "Why are you all freaking out?" No one answered. Rosie burst into tears. Chris yelled at her to shut up. Aiden was shaking. We left. All of us. Jenna texted her dad from the curb and we waited by the mailbox. No one spoke during the ride home. I never went back to Larkspur Lane. None of us did. Miles stopped coming to school 2 weeks later. They said he transferred. No one knew where. Sometimes late at night I still see that hallway in my dreams. The tall figure, the burlap sack, the way it tilted its head, like it could hear what I was thinking. And the worst part, it wasn't a doll. It moved and it knew. I was watching. Story 5. It all started the summer before 7th grade, when I used to spend almost every night at my best friend Mia Thompson's house. We were neighbors on Oak Ridge Drive, a quiet middle-class street in a town called Fairhaven, Michigan. The kind of neighborhood where people still waved when they passed and kids rode bikes until the porch lights came on. Mia and I were inseparable. Our parents used to joke that we must have been twins in another life. If I wasn't at her house, she was at mine. And during the summer, we basically lived together. Her house was older than mine, a 2-story blue colonial with white shutters, worn wooden floors, and a staircase that creaked with every step, making it impossible to move without being noticed. Her room was upstairs at the front of the house with 2 wide windows that looked out over the street. It was one of those rooms with personality, like it had a life of its own, always creaking and whispering as the house settled. Her parents, Eric and Dana, were always kind to me and let me sleep over whenever I wanted. It felt like a second home. That Friday night in mid-July started like any other. I walked over just after lunch carrying my sleeping bag under one arm and a plastic bag with snacks and an extra hoodie. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of grilled burgers drifted through the neighborhood. Mia greeted me at the door, smiling like she'd been waiting for me all day. "Finally," she said. "I was about to come drag you down myself." Inside, the house was cool thanks to the humming window units. We spent the day doing our usual things, watching dumb YouTube videos, scrolling through TikTok, painting our nails, and gossiping about our classmates. Dinner was spaghetti with garlic bread, and afterward her mom brought us warm, freshly baked brownies. By the time we went up to her room, the sky had shifted from pink to deep purple. The streetlights were beginning to flicker on one by one, casting a dim yellow glow on the pavement. We crawled into a blanket fort we'd built with chairs and fairy lights and watched a horror movie on our iPad. We paused it every so often to scream at the jump scares, and then laugh at how scared we were. I remember checking the time when the movie ended, 12:04 a.m., and that's when everything changed. "Look," Mia said suddenly, pulling the blanket off her head and crawling toward the window. I followed her, still giggling about the movie's ending. But when I saw her face, tight lips, narrowed eyes, I stopped cold. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer, just pointed. Down below, under the flickering streetlight, a man was walking slowly down the sidewalk. At first, I didn't think much of it. People sometimes walk their dogs late, but this man didn't have a dog, and he didn't seem to be going anywhere. He walked a few feet, stopped, turned around, retraced his steps. Again and again. like he was waiting for something or someone. "Do you know him?" I whispered. Mia shook her head. "Never seen him before. He wasn't dressed like someone out for a jog or a stroll. He wore a dark hoodie pulled up despite the 75-degree weather. Baggy pants, boots, and both hands stuffed into the front pocket. We watched him in silence, our breath fogging the glass. After a few minutes, he stopped walking. Just stood there, motionless, scanning the area. And then, as if he could feel our eyes on him, he looked up and stared straight at us. We dropped to the floor instantly, our hearts pounding in our chests. I could hear Mia whispering, "What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?" I wanted to believe he didn't see us. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he just glanced at the house. But we both knew that wasn't true. We stayed there on the floor, not talking, just listening. After a few minutes, we nervously laughed, trying to shake it off. "He probably didn't even see us," I said, more to convince myself than her. "Yeah," Mia replied. "Maybe he's just waiting for an Uber or something." But deep down, neither of us believed it. Then, the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the front door. We froze. Mia's house didn't have a doorbell. If you wandered in, you knocked, or didn't come in at all. We just sat there hoping we imagined it. Another knock, louder this time. Her parents were asleep at the end of the hall, and we didn't want to wake them unless we were sure. So stupidly, we decided to sneak downstairs and look through the side window next to the door. We didn't turn on any lights. Every creak of the stairs made my stomach churn. When we got down there, we crouched by the door and peeked through the glass. It was him, the same man from the street. He was standing way too close to the door, his face hidden beneath the hood, his posture tense, hunched. He shifted slightly as if he sensed us, then slowly turned his gaze directly at us. His face was pale, gaunt, with deep, wide eyes. I'll never forget the look in them. It wasn't like he was looking at us, more like he was looking through us. We ducked again. "What's happening?" Mia whispered, her voice shaking. And then he started pounding, with both fists, again and again. The entire door rattled in its frame. We screamed and bolted up the stairs. Mia's dad was the first to wake up. We burst into their room yelling that someone was trying to break in. When he rushed downstairs, the man was gone. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the yard, the porch, canvassed the neighborhood, but they found no trace of him. No footprints, no car nearby, nothing. One of the officers said it was probably someone drunk or high, a random homeless guy, but it didn't make sense. Why did he look at us twice? Why didn't he try to force his way in if he wanted to? And why did he look at us like he knew us? I called my parents and they came to pick me up. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Mia. We kept texting until the sun came up. We still talk about that night even now. We're both 23. I live in another state, and she moved out of that house 2 years ago. But a few months back, she told me something I haven't been able to forget. She was going through old family photos and found one from her 7th birthday. There were balloons, cake, her cousins and friends, including me wearing a shiny t-shirt and blue shorts. And in the background, near the fence, there was a man wearing a hoodie, staring straight at the camera. Mia swears no one remembers inviting him. Her parents don't know who he is. She showed me the photo on a video call. My blood ran cold. It was him, the same man. He had been there, years before we saw him walking down the street. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had opened that door, or if Mia's parents hadn't been home that night. And it haunts me to think that maybe he's still out there, waiting, watching. Story 6. I still remember how the air felt that night. Warm, still, and with that kind of silence you only notice as a kid when you're waiting for something exciting to happen. When I was 10, summer meant long days, sticky popsicles, and sleepovers that lasted until the first bird started to sing. I used to spend almost every weekend at my cousin Liam's house. His house was different, bigger, older, and with the kind of creaks that made every game of hide-and-seek feel like a real adventure. Unlike my small two-bedroom apartment, his house had real hiding spots, tight spaces, stairs that led to the attic, old closets, and a basement with 3 storage rooms. To me, it was like a castle. Back then, we didn't have iPads, TikTok, or even our own phones. If we wanted to have fun, we had to invent our own games. And our favorite was flashlight hide-and-seek. The rules were simple. No lights, 1 flashlight per person, and the person hiding got a 5-minute head start. We thought we were brave. We thought we were clever. But deep down, we were just kids, pretending in a house that knew how to keep secrets. Liam's parents were always easygoing. His mom, Aunt Rachel, worked night shifts at the hospital, and his dad was a surveyor, so sometimes he'd be gone for 2 or 3 days at a time. That night, both of them had gone to an anniversary party in Ocean View, a nearby town. They planned to spend the night at a hotel. Liam's older brother, Dean, was 17 and rebellious in the typical bored teenager way. He was supposed to stay and watch us. But right around 9 p.m., while we were finishing our grilled cheese sandwiches, Dean leaned against the fridge and said, "I'm heading out for a bit. Don't be idiots. Don't burn the house down. And if anyone asks, I'm asleep upstairs." "Cool," Liam said without even looking at him. Dean didn't wait for a reply. A minute later, we heard the back door close. It wasn't the first time he'd done it. Liam loved having the house to himself, more space, no rules, and Dean enjoyed sneaking out. It was the perfect arrangement for them, and me, being the guest cousin, didn't really get a say. We started our game like always, rock, paper, scissors. I lost. I had to hide first. 5 minutes, Liam said, grinning and holding up his cheap blue flashlight like it was a weapon. "And no, attic, you cheat." "It was just once," I called back, already tiptoeing toward the basement door. "And you never found me." While he counted in the dark basement, I went up. Not just to the first floor, but all the way to the second. Liam's house had a strange layout, like it had been built in pieces over decades. The second floor had an extra sitting room, 2 guest bedrooms, and a long hallway that always smelled like mothballs and dust. I snuck into the smallest room at the end of the hall. There were 2 big bean bags under a dusty window and a folded blanket on a box near the wall. Perfect. I wedged myself between the bean bags and pulled the blanket over me, leaving a small gap to breathe. The door was slightly ajar, just enough so Liam wouldn't suspect anything. All I had to do was stay still and wait. Something didn't feel right. A few minutes passed. I heard creaks on the stairs. Footsteps. Liam, I thought. They were slow but confident, like they weren't trying to hide. The carpet muffled the sound, but I could still follow the movement. They reached the hallway, then entered the guest room. The steps stopped, and then entered my room. I stayed frozen, my heart pounding. I listened closely. Whoever it was moved to the desk, then opened the closet, then another closet, then drawers. I was confused. That wasn't normal. Liam never checked drawers. He just shined the flashlight around, and if he didn't see me in 30 seconds, he'd leave. Then I heard it. Liam's voice, sing-songy. "Ah." It came from upstairs. My heart dropped. That meant the person in the room wasn't him. Whoever was in there wasn't Liam. Under the blanket, I didn't move an inch, but my mind screamed. I slowly lifted a corner of the blanket, just a little. The figure near the desk wasn't a kid. It was tall, much taller than Dean. Had to be over 6 feet. Wearing dark jeans and a light hoodie with the hood up. I couldn't see the face, just the shape. Then he froze. Liam called again. Getting warmer. He was getting close to the room. The man, whoever he was, slipped into the corner behind a short wall near the closet. Silent. Tense. Like a predator waiting. Liam appeared in the doorway with his flashlight, still playing, shining it around lazily. The beam brushed the beanbags. I couldn't tell if he saw me, but I decided I had to move. I sat up, pretending to give up. Okay. You got me, I said, laughing nervously and throwing off the blanket. Liam smiled. You were tricky this time. I got up, walked to him, and threw my arm around his shoulder. Let's go get something to eat, I said with a shaky laugh, guiding him out of the room. At the top of the stairs, I leaned into his ear and whispered, There's someone in that room. We have to go. Now. Liam went pale. He didn't argue. We ran down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door straight into the yard. We bolted to the neighbor's house. I don't even remember if we knocked. Mrs. Halpern opened the door, saw our faces, and let us in without a word. We told her everything, tripping over our words. She called 911 immediately. The police arrived in 6 minutes. From her living room window, we watched them enter Liam's house. Flashlights, raised voices. 5 minutes later, they brought him out in handcuffs. He wasn't a neighbor, not someone the family knew. He'd been seen walking around the neighborhood 2 days before, asking if anyone was selling tools or scrap metal. Police found a screwdriver and a box cutter in the pocket of his hoodie. He had no criminal record, but the way he moved, how he searched the room, how still he stood, that haunted me for years. Liam never wanted to play flashlight hide-and-seek again. Neither did I. His parents installed a new security system. Dean was grounded for the rest of the summer, which honestly felt like too little, considering what could have happened. And me. Even now, so many years later, I can't sleep in a new house without checking every closet and corner. I know how fast childhood can change, how fun turns into fear with a single breath. Sometimes I think about that man, how calm he looked, like he was waiting, like he'd done it before. And I wonder, what would have happened if Liam hadn't said my name? Story 7. I never liked sleeping at other people's houses. My mom said I was homey, but it wasn't that. It was the way unfamiliar walls seemed to breathe at night, how I could never quite trust the shadows, especially when I was supposed to be asleep. But that night at 13 years old, I made an exception for my best friend Alex. It was a Friday in late October, and we had been planning it for weeks. His dad had finally given him permission to stay up late, and he promised a Luigi's Mansion marathon and enough pizza rolls to make us sick. Alex lived on a quiet street in a rural town just outside Asheville, North Carolina. One of those places with a single main road, a gas station, and streetlights that flickered more than they actually lit anything. His house sat at the end of a dead-end street, next to another house that had been empty for over a year. Right across from it was a field so overgrown it probably hadn't seen a lawnmower in a decade. Beyond the backyard was a thick, tangled forest. Even during the day, it looked dark. That night, we were in the downstairs living room, just a short hallway from the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Alex's dad, Mark, was asleep upstairs in the main bedroom. The living room was our kingdom for the night. Sleeping bags, snacks, the GameCube, and a stack of horror movies we definitely shouldn't have been watching. It started drizzling around 9 o'clock. By 10 o'clock, the drizzle had turned into a thin, steady mist. And by 11 o'clock, the sky had taken on a purplish bruise color, occasionally lit by silent flashes of lightning. That's when we heard the first knock. We were deep into a boss fight when it happened. 3 knocks. Solid, deliberate, right on the sliding glass door behind us. Alex paused the game. "Did you hear that?" he asked quietly. I nodded. Yeah, was it outside? Had to be. Neither of us moved right away. The blinds were closed, so we couldn't see anything. My heart was already starting to race. "I'm gonna check," Alex whispered, standing up. "Don't," I told him, maybe louder than I needed to, but he was already reaching for the cord. I jumped up from the couch and turned off the TV and the lamp. The room went completely dark. Outside, even with the blinds down, the night looked brighter than the inside. Lightning lit the mist like camera flashes through smoke. Alex slowly opened the blinds. There was nothing, just the wet glow of the grass and the reflection of our fear in the glass. We didn't speak for several minutes. We just sat there in the dark, staring at the door, as if waiting might somehow give us an explanation. Eventually, we turned the lights back on and resumed the game, though I couldn't stop glancing at the glass. We tried to convince ourselves it was nothing. Maybe the wind, a branch, a squirrel. Part of me even wanted to believe it was Mark messing with us, though I knew that was the last thing he'd ever do. It must have been close to midnight when it happened again. This time it wasn't subtle. Knock, knock, knock. We froze. 3 knocks, firm, louder than before. This time they felt heavier, more intentional. We both looked toward the door. With the lights on inside, all we could see was our reflection in the glass. Then lightning lit up the yard, and for a split second I saw him. A figure, a man, standing still very close to the glass, soaked, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie and heavy boots. His face, I couldn't see clearly, but I knew he was watching us. We bolted. Alex nearly tripped over the coffee table, and I was already halfway up the stairs. We ran straight to his dad's room, flung the door open, and practically pulled him out of bed. Mark wasn't the type to scare easily. Even half asleep and confused, he grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat from under his bed. We went out to the backyard with him, throwing on our shoes as we walked. The porch light came on, revealing nothing but swaying grass and puddles. But then Alex pointed. Footprints, he said. There were deep boot prints in the mud, fresh, leading straight to the sliding glass door, and then veering off. We followed the trail across the yard, toward the edge of the woods. But just before reaching the trees, they disappeared. The mud gave way to firmer ground, harder to track. And then, nothing. No one, no sound, just mist, trees, and the distant rumble of thunder. We went back inside. Mark checked everything again, locked up, and told us to stay in the living room. Probably some local messing around, he muttered. But I could tell he didn't believe it either. Alex and I got into our sleeping bags, eyes wide open. This time we left the TV off. The blind stayed shut. I couldn't stop looking at the clock. My body was tense, frozen in anticipation, waiting for the next knock. And when it came, it was exactly at 12:15. Softer this time, but more deliberate, like the person knew we were listening. Knock, knock. We didn't wait. We were already halfway up the stairs before the sound finished fading. Mark was already awake, fully dressed this time. He told us to stay in the hallway and went out to the yard alone. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, he returned, soaked, and shook his head. Nothing, he said. I checked everything, even the front, the woods, the field. No one. He called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later, tires splashing through the water as they pulled into the cul-de-sac. They searched the area, took our statements, and told us what we already knew. There wasn't much they could do. No attempted break-in, no threats, no clear evidence. Might have been a neighbor playing a prank, one of the officers said. That's not funny, Mark replied angrily. My son is terrified. We stayed up the entire night. Mark slept in the recliner in the living room with the bat across his lap. Nothing else happened. No more knocks. But I never went back to Alex's house, not once. Years later, we still talked about that night. Sometimes Alex would laugh. Remember the weird rainy night? But I could see in his eyes that he hadn't really forgotten. It wasn't just the knocking. It was the timing, the certainty, the footprints that led nowhere. The way that man, if it was a man, stood motionless in the lightning, like he wanted us to see him. And the worst part, that same week after telling my mom I didn't want to sleep over at Alex's anymore, I looked out my bedroom window one night. We lived nearly 8 miles from Alex, and I swear I saw a figure across the street, standing between the trees, watching our house, and then another flash of lightning, and he was gone. Story 8. I was 12 the first and last time I spent the night at Riley Martin's house. We weren't exactly best friends. We were what you'd call summer break friends. The kind you click with when school's out and the days stretch long enough for bike rides, soda-fueled sleepovers, and dumb dares. We met the summer before at the community pool, started talking over pool noodles and shared boredom, and ended up hanging out every few weekends, until he moved away that spring. Riley's family didn't go far, just a few hours south from Lexington to some rural town I'd never heard of called White Hollow. His mom said it was for quiet and space, but Riley told me it was mostly because his dad got laid off and they couldn't afford the city anymore. Still, they had a house, and from what I could tell from pictures, it was way bigger than their old apartment. By July, I begged my mom to let me go see him. She said no 3 times before she gave in. We drove out early Friday morning, winding through roads that looked less like highways and more like afterthoughts. By the time we pulled into his gravel driveway, I was sweating through my shirt and clutching a bag of snacks I brought for the weekend. Riley was waiting on the porch in a worn-out hoodie, even though it was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. He greeted me like nothing had changed, but the bags under his eyes were deep, like he hadn't slept well in days. "You made it," he said with a lopsided smile, giving me a half-hug. "Told you this was the middle of nowhere." And he wasn't kidding. The house sat at the edge of a wooded lot, no other buildings in sight. A 2-story structure, weathered and fading, with wood siding that had long since lost its color. The porch creaked under our feet like it hadn't been stepped on since the 70s. "Dude," I said, stepping back to take it all in. "This place is huge." "Yeah, it looks nice, but at night it's weird," he replied quietly. "I'll show you later." I laughed, thinking he just wanted to spook me. That was our thing. Light scares, horror movies, seeing who could freak the other out more. At the time, I thought he was just setting the scene. I was wrong. We didn't do much that first day. I helped him hook up his old Xbox in the bedroom, and we played until dinner. His parents were quiet but nice. His dad, a stocky man with hands like bricks, barely said a word. His mom, softer and more jittery, kept asking if I needed anything. Socks, bug spray, another pillow. I told her no every time. She kept asking anyway. That night we camped out in his room surrounded by candy and Netflix. Around 11 I paused the movie. "Hey," I said, "did you hear that?" Riley turned the volume down. There it was. Thump, scrape, pause. It sounded like it was coming from beneath us. "You guys have a basement?" I asked, sitting up. Riley went still. He took a moment to answer. "We don't have access from the house," he muttered. "So, what's down there?" "I don't know," he said, avoiding eye contact. "We've been hearing stuff the past few days. Dad says it's probably animals. Or the pipes." "That doesn't sound like animals." He nodded once, but he kept staring at the floor, like he could see through it. The next morning after breakfast, we went out to the backyard. It was warm, with clouds that couldn't decide whether to stay or go. Riley led me behind the house, where the grass faded into weeds and branches. There wasn't a real path, just gaps between bushes. "We can explore a little," he said, "but not far." "Why not?" He hesitated. "I don't want to get lost." We didn't go far, maybe 200 meters. Then Riley tripped on something metal. He stumbled and looked down. "What the hell?" he murmured, crouching. I followed and saw what he'd found. An old basement door, half buried in moss and leaves. Rusty iron hinges, no lock. "I didn't know this was here," he said, brushing the handle. "Dude, this is straight up Blair Witch," I said, backing away. He smiled, but he looked pale. Still, he pulled the door. It shrieked like a wounded animal. The metal groaned with every inch. Beneath it, a square hole dropped into pitch-black darkness. A narrow staircase led down one side, rotting in places, and then the smell hit us. Earth rot, and something chemical. Riley turned on his phone flashlight. The beam barely pierced the darkness, but we saw enough. A dirt floor, broken glass glittering. Something metal leaned against the wall. A cot, shelves, and then, clink. Something moved. We froze. Another sound, like metal scraping against concrete. Closer. "Riley," I whispered. "We need to go." He nodded, eyes wide, and then we heard it. Hands on the steps. Someone was coming up. We ran. I don't remember the way back, just branches hitting my arms and my lungs burning. When we got there, his dad was in the garage. He dropped what he was holding the second he saw our faces. "There's someone down there," Riley yelled, "under the yard." His dad followed us without a word. When he saw the door, he stopped cold. "Holy shit," he muttered. "I thought this was sealed." He looked at us. "Inside, now." We argued for about 10 seconds, until he shouted in a voice that didn't allow debate. Riley's mom came halfway down the hall, worried. "What's going on?" "Call Frank and Leon," his dad told her. "Tell them I need them now." 30 minutes later, 2 men arrived. One older, one younger. They brought high-powered flashlights, tool belts, and something that looked like a crowbar. Riley and I were told to stay inside while they went down into the basement. We waited. 10 minutes, then 20. When they came back, none of them said a word. Riley's dad was pale, his jaw tight. Frank looked like he'd seen a ghost. The third guy didn't even come inside. They called Riley's mom into the kitchen and closed the door. I heard murmuring, then crying. An hour later, 2 squad cars arrived. They put us in Riley's room and told us not to come out. The last thing I saw before the door shut was a white sheet being lowered from one of the patrol cars. I didn't hear from Riley for years. He stopped replying to my messages. They moved, vanished. It wasn't until I turned 17 that he texted me, out of nowhere. "Riley, I wasn't supposed to tell you, but I think you should know." "Me? Know what?" "Riley, my dad found 3 bags with full bodies down there." "Me? You're kidding." "Riley, I wish. Old, sealed. Whoever lived there was hiding corpses. Beer bottles everywhere, weed smell, blood stains in the corners." "Me? Was the guy who was coming up alive?" "Riley, they think so. The one we heard climbing. Wasn't there when the adults went down." "Me? Holy sh..." "Riley, it wasn't pipes. That sound we heard. It was him. I don't think about it much. But some nights late at night I remember the scream of that door opening. The sound of hands on the stairs. And I wonder what would have happened if we had waited just 30 seconds longer."